trained support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk now.
Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I'm an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, kicking my ass and cursing me out, it's David Shoemaker!
Thank you for having me. This is maybe the first week in Ringer history where I'm coming close to your podcast total. So
That's true.
We're working, man.
David is the host of Westworld: The Recappables, so we're gonna talk a bit about Westworld.
Sure.
Later on, David obviously also hosts the Masked Man Show. Is anything else? Oh, in the press box.
Yeah.
So that's 3 pods you can catch Shoemaker on the Ringer Podcast Network.
And Westworld Recapables is twice a week, so
that's right, because you guys have the Tuesday show that kind of goes deep dive onto theories. Yeah. So that's 4 a week, man. That's like 1918 pitcher rotation. It's like here's the ball again.
I'm going for Tommy John's after Westworld is over.
Yeah, whatever the podcast version of Tommy John, you and I both need it. But I have David here, ably filling in for Andy, who is on a jet plane, I'm sure watching a film that came out in 2016. And that's fitting because Shoemaker and I are talking about Deadpool, which is Deadpool 2, following up the blockbuster 2016 movie with Ryan Reynolds. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about Westworld. But I wanted, if you come to The Watch, you come to hear about IP.
That's my favorite thing to talk about.
So I wanted to talk about Lord of the Rings because last night, the OneRing.net, which I don't know about you, man, but this is like my go-to Tolkien gossip site. It's like the hoops hype for Tolkien. They broke that they had confirmed with multiple sources that this Amazon show set in the Lord of the Rings universe is going to be about young Aragorn. And that is obviously the character that was played.
Which is the worst rapper name of all time.
Young Aragorn. I could see him on a Yachty song.
Okay.
But
fair.
This is obviously the character that's played by Viggo Mortensen in the Peter Jackson films. And to my reaction to this, so the actual tweet from the OneRing.net, which is where I saw it, is breaking. We have confirmed from multiple sources that Amazon Studios' new billion-dollar LOTR series will open its first season centered on a young Aragorn. And my first reaction to this was, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Because $1 billion, and it's like it was $250 up front for the rights, is what I believe the number was, to get the rights from the Tolkien estate to make this show in the first place. It's like, if you're going to spend that kind of money, it's the same thing for the Star Wars franchise. You got to have some Skywalkers.
Oh yeah, you got to have some high profile characters. Although it's interesting, like I wonder what, I mean, obviously Aragorn is like, one of the most high profile characters from that franchise.
Yeah.
But I'm sure like Viggo's sitting at home just like, could we not just do old Aragorn?
Yeah,
could we not just like keep this going? And then like people, I'm sure the audience would be even bigger for that.
They let him get pretty old in the movies themselves. Doesn't he like quote unquote die at the end? Yeah. But I'm sure he is like, as he's paging through his Eastern Promises expanded universe scripts that he probably gets sent. He's like, I could go back to being Strider.
And he's an older dude, but I think you're absolutely right. It's a big character. People recognize it, and people are gonna be into seeing what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit with Paul Scheer on Monday, and he was such a great guest. We talked about his work on the new version of Galaxy Quest and how he was updating that, but still wanted to have ties to the original. And that's the same thing I'm thinking about with this, because as we see more and more things get set in this universe, or reimagining Friday Night Lights, or there's rumors Bob Greenblatt did a very bad job this week at Upfronts of denying that there would be a new Office on NBC in the near future. And even in that announcement, there was some follow-up reporting that there were several members of the Office cast who were keen about rejoining the show, basically.
Of course, yeah, who wouldn't be?
As they would be, because these things only work. They're only as strong as their connections to the past are. Whereas, I think we've seen that. That's been proven out. But I think when we were first delving into this, and it was like, they're going to have Star Wars anthology movies, and there's going to be multiple trilogies of Star Wars movies. I think we were all kind of like, as kids, when we were sort of growing up on something like that, we're like playing with the action figures, but imagining new stories and imagining new worlds and imagining new plot lines for them. And it's easier said than done.
Oh, yeah.
It's easier said than done to just be like, there's some LOTR stuff that is not even in Peter Jackson movies and was never even mentioned and is like way off on like another like part of this story. But we're gonna spend $250 million just for the right to make that. Man, they're gonna come for this.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, everyone understands why the IP is so valuable, right?
Sure.
Or why any IP is so valuable. But we talk about, Game of Thrones as IP. We talk about, Westworld as IP. It was pre-existing movies, big time writer, was the creator. But those shows worked because they were good shows.
Yeah.
Right? And they were well produced and well marketed and well acted and directed and everything else. So you got to actually make the product.
Yeah.
And now there'll be Game of Thrones spinoffs that presumably there'll be some of the same production crews, some of the same creatives. But the bar is weirdly even higher, I feel like. For those.
Yeah.
And that's where they're going to be with the Star Wars. And listen, you get a baseline of people that are going to show up to watch any Star Wars anything, and the baseline for Star Wars is way higher than anything else. So there's a lot of confidence that comes with that. Lord of the Rings, I feel like, is really complicated.
It is.
It's a really weird move to spend that much money. Not weird. You understand why they did it, because you keep hearing that Amazon wants their own
Game of Thrones.
Although I said semi-jokingly to, I think, Mallory Rubin the other day, it's like when they announced The Expanse, or I said this to Allison, The Expanse was canceled, and everyone's trying to get someone to, and they were going after Amazon to pick it up. And I'm like, isn't it? I mean, I feel like there's just as good of a bet if you took The Expanse, get that small but dedicated fan base over, and then just make The Expanse 25% better.
Yeah.
Right. Just like really go in, like hire one of the writers from Game of Thrones to be the showrunner and just spend a lot of money.
Start it over or continue?
No,
it?
Continue it, but just make it better.
Yeah.
Like make it that show. You
yeah,
know?
Absolutely.
But I think that Lord of the Rings in particular is really tough because, for one thing, a lot of the premise of Thrones was knifing Lord of the Rings in the back, right? I love this. He loved those books, loved the IP for whatever it's worth, but turned it on its head.
Right.
And the other thing is we know where it goes. Now, a lot of people have theories as to where Game of Thrones goes, but there's going to be no question that Aragorn survives any given episode.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so there's a Game of Thrones, we never know what's going to happen next. And you see this in other shows like The Walking Dead, when the main characters can die. And I guess we can have supplemental characters that die, but, we know what happens at the end. It's the Peter Jackson franchise.
Yeah. I mean,
so it's a little bit more difficult to get that sort of prestige, uncertainty, that storytelling ability in there when you are dealing with such
known quantities.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then outside of the narrative stuff, there's the production value, which Amazon obviously is willing to spend a ton of money on this. But the Lord of the Rings movies were groundbreaking in their use of special effects.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing that Game of Thrones did very smartly, and I'm sure part of it was a product of just making sure that there was going to be an audience. And I don't even know if HBO and Michael Lombardo, when they started that show, knew what kind of audience that they were going to develop or have for Game of Thrones. But they've had this really nice trajectory where those early seasons, especially the first season, is more palace intrigue than anything else, right? It's mostly people betraying one another. You have to ride down here, and then I'm going to ride up there. But when you ride up there, I'm actually not going to be here. I snuck out.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And then as they've gone on in seasons, there's been bigger and bigger and bigger set pieces and Battle of the Bastards and giants and dragons and all this other stuff.
It's funny. We would have those conversations the whole way through the first 5 seasons of the series about them saving their money for the big last episode. I mean, you would see you could flip the channel and see insurance commercials that had a bigger CGI dragon budget than Game of Thrones did for the big, for the first couple seasons of Dragons. And I mean, the difference is going to be on Amazon with all the money they've already spent and that they're going to continue to spend. It's not this sort of we're not going to give them some pat on the back for using their budget to its fullest. We're going to be why didn't they spend $100 million more?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's the problem with when you're playing with something like this high stakes, you're going to get to the place where most people are going to sit down, turn this on and be so last I checked, it was the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
And that was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So what are you guys doing? Are you going to have a guy riding around in the forest?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be some epic? Now, I have to admit, I'm not a Tolkien scholar. I haven't read.
Nor am I.
I think I read Fellowship of the Ring, but I don't know about the Aragorn legend. One thing that I did find very amusing was the OneRing.net tweeted this out and then did a whole tweet storm about all the stuff that it could be about, and it's elves and all this other stuff, and it sounds great. Some dude was hey, P.S. Where's the text for this? Because I didn't, I don't remember reading a lot about young Aragorn.
Right.
And the OneRing.net people were yeah, man, it's page 244 to 252 in this book, and he's so that's 8 pages.
Yeah.
And they were like, they said, hashtag don't be hasty. And then they had like a whole explanation for how they could fill it in. But this is kind of the issue when you're mining some of this stuff, is that eventually, just like it did for Thrones, this will be the creative responsibility and work of some TV showrunner.
Yeah.
And that's something that, like, Peter Jackson really never got out from under Lord of the Rings. I mean, this is a massive, massive job, and he might come back for this show. There's rumors that they're trying to get him.
Well, it'd be great. I mean, I think that would bring some level of like kind of authorial stability to the show. You know, I mean, one of the things the fans that fans of any IP, of any book series, of any whatever these days, I mean, Star Wars included, insist on is authenticity, right? And even if it's not, you know, they could still love it one way or the other. But those are the big complaints that you hear. This wasn't true. You know, these new Star Wars movies weren't true to the expanded book universe or whatever. Right. You know, and that's the kind of you want the confidence that somebody who knows what they're doing is back there pulling the levers.
I don't think that this kind of stuff is lending itself to. I don't think that people are looking for a radical reimagining of Lord of the Rings. Like, they're not like, I want a gritty Hurt Locker version of Lord of the Rings. I want Denis Villeneuve's version of Lord of the Rings. They
not
want,
at first anyway. No.
Yeah, but I think that that's even been proven out with some of these other expanded universes and franchises, where for the most part, you know, Star Wars director musical chairs is really fun to follow, but at the end of the day, whether Ron Howard directs it or Gareth Edwards directs it or Tony Gilroy directs it,
right,
or whoever comes in and finishes it, they all wind up kind of in the same zone. And that, I wonder whether that's the case. You might as well just go get Peter Jackson, because are you really going to want someone who's like, I have my fresh take on Lord of the Rings?
No. I mean, I think the Star Wars universe, I mean, you kind of bore that out. I mean, you're right. I think everybody conceptually wants a bunch of, like, you know, very different movies or TV shows, but you kind of want, like, not until you're already exhausted by the mainstream version of it or like the very expected version of it, and who knows if you ever get tired of it. You know?
That's maybe why the Russos are so successful at what they're doing. It's because they're just kind of like, we know where to insert ourselves and not.
Yep. Yeah, within the context of it. I think that what you were saying before about the Lord of the Rings movies is really important, because there are a ton of diehard Tolkien fans, people who've read every page, have definitely read that 8-page passage that this show is going to be based on. But so many people are going to be coming to this because of the movies. Yeah. And those movies have been living for the past, 10 years on TVs and on iPads and computer screens.
They stay
and stuff.
on TNT.
Yeah, they're on all the time. So, you know, back to what you were saying about special effects and everything else, you're going to be comparing them to those movies, and they hold up. They definitely hold up on TV. When you watch them now, they feel very much at home on television.
Yeah, I mean, there's in some of these cases, and this has been, you've read a lot, there's a lot of rumors about different shows that are in the works because of upfronts and because of, you know, the networks are sort of announcing plans to do X, Y, and Z. And I saw I can't remember if it's who's developing it, but somebody's developing a young Alfred show.
I saw that
Batman
yesterday.
Universe. And I think Sean Fantasy tweeted, like, this is hell. This is my idea of hell. And that is, like, would you make a show about a young butler in any other way if it wasn't part of, like, this is the guy who winds up being Batman's butler?
Right.
No. But I think that that's why, like, there are some ways in which this stuff is scraping the bottom of the barrel. And then you have something like this where you're like, yeah, you know, even though they had, like, probably 21 hours or 22 hours of Lord of the Rings movies at the end of the day with the Hobbits, they probably still have a lot more stories they can tell.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Okay.
I think it'll be fun to watch.
Well, do you think Deadpool 2 is going to be fun to watch?
I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
I think it'll definitely be fun to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, I really have not been paying that much attention because I know I'm going tomorrow to the opening. And not to the grand opening, but I'll be there on opening day probably, and I'm excited to see it. And in a lot of ways, my expectations are kind of low. I mean, I liked that the first one was very different than all the other superhero movies, or enough different. You know, we're working with the same set of crayons here. But you know, I don't. It feels like, even though I've been keeping a little bit of a distance from the reviews, it seems like the headlines I've been reading, people have not been overly positive about it.
I think they were like, it's a Deadpool movie, and this is exactly what it feels like to have more than one of them.
Yeah.
Which is, there's probably some thrills and some laughs, but there's like a limit to the, like, emotional resonance of the character, and also, like, how serious this film is. Like, not a serious movie, so it's sort of, it's gonna it's going to have to bear the weight of being a blockbuster while also just being like, this is essentially like an 80s action comedy.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think that when Infinity War came out and before that, I mean, since the Avengers movies have been coming out, there's these kind of regular occasions for people to write, is this what Hollywood is now? Is this what is this all that movies have to offer, is these superhero movies? And in some ways, Deadpool is the kind of the distillation of it, that when you get these, experienced movie reviewers who feel sort of forced to go watch Deadpool and to report on it because this is the movie of the month. So people are the exhaustion is sort of clear.
For those people, I would just say that this is like for like what's been going on forever.
Yeah,
like my dad would do this in the 80s when he was reviewing movies, and everybody would be going to see Last Boy Scout instead of Howard's End or something, and he would be miserable about it. And that's so just the fact that like First Reformed is also coming out this week and is by all accounts one of the best films of the year. And 1% of the people who are going to go see Deadpool will see that movie. But like this stuff all tends to even out. I think that it's just the sort of blast radius of these blockbusters now feels almost like you can't even have, it doesn't even matter what your opinion is because they are unstoppable.
Yeah.
It would have to be something like Fantastic Four that is just absolutely savaged from its pre-production up until its release and then disavowed by the people who are in it or making it for it to be like, no one's going to go see a superhero movie. It's
a perpetual motion machine. I mean, I feel like half of the push notifications I get on my phone are about Deadpool ticket pre-sales. I mean, it's like, there's all these articles that are about how well it's about to do. We got the same thing with Ultron. I mean, with Infinity War, we got the same thing with Black Panther. Mm-hmm. And as long as the kind of pre-hype is on point, is on message, then people are going to just pour into the theaters.
Would 15-year-old Shoemaker be surprised at Deadpool's popularity now? Not as a movie, but as a character?
Well, I think 15-year-old me would have felt really self-satisfied. Like, see, this guy, I told you this guy was awesome.
Right.
But the 15-year-old me would also be like, no, where the hell is Lobo the movie? Or where's all this? Where are all my other favorites? I need the Max on the big screen.
It's amazing to think of like an underserved comic fan.
Sure, right now?
Yeah.
I mean, every podcast that The Ringer's done has hit on this at some point, but like just the amount of gratitude that I felt when like the first X-Men movie popped up and wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
That's a real thing. But I mean, Deadpool is I think in a lot of ways it's just made for 15-year-olds. I mean, that is the audience, even though it's rated R, and there's a lot of
and there's a lot of perpetual 15-year-olds out there who like want to revisit that.
I think that's exactly it. I think that we embrace our, there's this sort of like everyone's a nerd theory now, but it's also like everyone's still a kid, and we still love all that stuff.
That's why I think this. I mean, we were talking about this with Micah yesterday. But like that's one of the reasons why I think that this is such a popular character now, because it is if you want to care about X-Force and try and like parse the Fox version of the Marvel Universe versus the Marvel Studios version, the Disney version, there's some stuff in there for you. And I think that this movie is going to get into X-Force. And by all accounts, there would be an X-Force movie before there's a Deadpool 3. Mm-hmm. But if you just want to see dick jokes and headshots, like this is this movie.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that everybody points at about Deadpool is the kind of self-awareness, the breaking of the fourth wall, and that's all real. I mean, I think all of the Marvel movies have been very self-aware, and that's why they succeed in a lot of ways where the DC movies don't. Mm-hmm. It's just the sort of ability to laugh at oneself, or to kind of be aware of the whole enterprise. But we were talking a little bit with Zach Mack right before we started recording, and it was in a lot of ways Deadpool ate itself the moment it existed. Mm-hmm. Right? There's no more there's no other wall to break, right? Unless Ryan Reynolds walks into your movie theater, which he seems to do it on the press tour every day.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's and there's a wink in every Marvel movie. There's a wink in every movie you see now.
Yeah, because it probably feels good to play with a lead. Like, DC doesn't even have the luxury at this point, even though those movies are nominally, like, they make a lot of money, or they at least have big box office returns. They don't really have the luxury of joking about, like, remember when we miscast this part? It's like that Marvel doesn't have that problem, so they can all sort of be teasing each other about, like, oh yeah, like we've been doing this for so long, or like we're all such hot guys named Chris. It's like, can you imagine a moment like that in a DC movie?
No, but I mean, part of that is that DC deliberately sort of went the other direction. It's just like the color scheme is different. The whole vibe, the directorial vibe is just very earnest, and they made a deliberate move to not look like MCU.
Shoemaker, I feel like I'm in good hands because obviously, Andy was actually not that harsh on Westworld on Monday, but generally, I think that the conversations that Andy and I have revolve around like a very good topic, which is this show good or not? Mm-hmm. Westworld's sort of the television version of these superhero movies, where I think someone like Andy is probably like throwing his hands up and saying, hey, like aren't we gonna have a conversation about whether this is good or not? And everybody else is like, it's too late for that.
Yeah.
You're in it. You're in the Matrix right now.
Deep in it, yeah.
How hard or easy is it for you to like sometimes stick your head up and say like, wait a second, how I actually like feel about this as like a story and a piece of art?
So we've been watching the screeners, which are about to end, sadly, but we've been watching, a couple days ahead of whenever the regular folks out there get to watch it. But we watch it in a room with 4 or 5 people.
Yeah,
people who are going to be on the show, someone from the social media department, whatever. And so you get a little bit of a cross section, and you can see how people are reacting. And then I usually just watch as they watch, and then I'll watch it again on my own and sort of see how I feel. So you get a little bit of a zoomed out view, but it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the answer that you implicitly posed is pretty straightforward. That like, it doesn't really matter if it's good or not. Especially like season 1, I think that was a really important conversation.
Sure.
I think with season 2, for better or worse, they've just been doing stuff, I mean, they've clearly have tried to get a totally different vibe for every episode. Like the first scene in every episode has been just engineered to make you feel out of place and excited.
Yeah.
And the show still has this sort of earnestness that was overflowing in season 1, but it's like a very earnest person directing, Temple of Doom or something. Like they're just trying. They're trying. It's a totally different show, and it's a show where like the holy shit moments and the plot twists and everything are much more at home. Everything just sort of flows seamlessly, and I've been enjoying the hell out of this season.
I have too, because I think I came to a nice place inside of myself where I was like, this is just a multi-million-dollar version of HQ. Like, we're all going to gather on Sunday, and we're going to try and figure this thing out.
Yeah.
We're going to take the test. We're going to, like, try to answer these questions. And those questions aren't, like, about the nature of humanity. Or no, I'm not looking to Westworld to teach me anything about the nature of humanity. I am looking at Westworld as this, like, ornate puzzle. And this actually, like, very interesting demonstration of what happens if you take away all the things that you're taught to do first in a story. Mm-hmm. Where are we? When are we? Who are we?
Yeah.
What do we want? And then like you take it from there. Like all these basic like narrative functions that you're supposed to perform when you're starting a story. And Westworld has done that to some extent. They have been like, this is somebody and this is what they want, or this is a robot and this is what it wants. But the way that they've kind of said, well, we're not going to tell you where it is, or we're not going to tell you when it is, or we're not going to tell you who put them here, or why they put them here, or what their ulterior motive is, has become kind of fascinating. And in that way, I don't then have to worry about whether or not I find Dolores and Teddy conversations particularly crackling. I mean, if I want Hepburn and Tracy, I guess I can watch Hepburn and Tracy movies,
Yeah, and it's hard to do. I mean, Dolores and Teddy are doing this sort of like meta version of Hepburn and Tracy or whoever it is, and it makes it,
or like a syrup version of it, like
and so they might be doing the best possible version of it. That doesn't necessarily make it like a joy that leaps off the screen. I think you're right. I think that some of those I mean, that they're messing with us on some of those basic questions.
Sure.
The where are we thing is the most obvious one, because in episode 1 of this season, you had the military men in that kind of the second, I guess not the opening scene, but when Bernard wakes up on the beach, and then he goes, when we see Carl Strand for the first time, he's speaking to the Chinese military or whatever. And when my first read on that was, this was Nolan and Joy saying, all these theories about where we're located is not important to the plot. This is us saying, stop talking about it. We're just going to throw it in the very beginning of the first episode.
Yeah.
But ever since then, they've been kind of rolling that back and letting and giving us all these hints that like we don't know exactly where we are.
Right.
That military was there. We've seen some signs in Chinese or whatever, but like they've not said it out loud. And now, and all of those crazy theories that like maybe we're on the moon and China just owns it or something or like whatever, like all that makes a lot more sense.
Yes.
So I mean, I've said all season that you know there's a huge unreliable narrator motif to the show, which you see with like Bernard not knowing where he is in space and time, and Dolores not still coming to grips with who she's going to be. But the showrunners are the real unreliable narrators because that you don't know. You know, if this show was being run by someone who had done it before, I feel like you would feel more confident that they were making every decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they're doing it right or wrong, but doing it in a way that we're comfortable, that we're familiar with.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's sort of like you go to an art museum and there's this giant piece of like modern expressionist painting on the wall or whatever. And then you're like, I wonder what that was all about. And you read the little placard that's next to it, and you're like, I don't really buy that. That was just some like 25-year-old that wrote that description.
Right.
You know, I don't really know if it's true or not.
Right.
But like this whole thing is really cool. Like this painting is really beautiful, and I'm into it, and I can't, and I would love to hear the painter talk about it.
I think that just to kind of echo what we were talking about earlier, and when you have these things that are like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, and you have a huge crowd of people who have like a pre-established investment in whether it's characters or a world or whatever, then that's both very powerful because you have their attention, but you also are playing with their expectations. The difference with Westworld is that I feel like it is almost crowdsourced.
Yes.
Like we're writing it. They may or may not take our advice or acknowledge our theories are correct or not, or play into our expectations or subvert them, and those subversions or confirmations may or may not make much sense.
Yeah.
But there is 1,000% a relationship between the Westworld fan base and the Westworld creative energy, and
absolutely true.
What we're looking for in this show and what we're sort of piecing together is definitely like the central tension of like the experience of watching it. It's not, oh God, I really hope that Dolores is redeemed or that, William is redeemed at the end of this long journey through this world. It's like, that may or may not happen. They may make 9 seasons of this and they could be, the last 3 of them could be in Rajworld for all we know.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's all about the kind of immersive experience. It's like True Detective season 1. Like I had one of my best friends back in New York, Tom, like we have all of the same tastes in like books and TV and movies and stuff. But he missed True Detective season 1, and I just kept telling him, you got to check this out. It's so great. You got to check it out. And when he finally got around to watching it, like 9 months later, he was like, yeah, it was pretty good.
Did he already know all the like Yellow King stuff?
No, I think he'd stayed away, but he just wasn't as into it as I was expecting him to be. And we started talking through it, and I was just like, oh, you know what you're not getting that I got is Reddit.
Yeah.
Like Sunday night, you go right from the show to the message boards, and you're part of this experience with everybody else trying to figure out the literary sources and everything. And that's a really important part of how TV is made now. And Westworld has got it. I mean, this past episode, there was a book that was very clearly put right in the opening scene. The camera panned by. And I couldn't get in the screener I couldn't pause or screen grab it to figure out what it was, but I was just like, I can't wait till Reddit figures this out. And Reddit figured it out 20 minutes after the show went off the air.
What was it?
It was the Vonnegut book, The Sirens of Titan.
Okay.
Which is all about free will and about a very rich man who like makes his home in outer space on another planet.
For you, I mean, I think that the first season, and one of the reasons why, if I could speak for him, Andy struggled with it, was ultimately a lack of interest in the character trajectory of robots. Like what happens to them and whether or not they are quote unquote free or not.
Mm-hmm.
Has the show for you moved past that? And if so, what is the most interesting thing about this show outside of like the plot mechanics of like where is this show taking place or whatever?
I feel like the hosts have taken even more of a backseat this season in terms of watchability anyway to the humans.
Mm-hmm.
They're still very interesting, but I think I enjoyed watching them as unwitting. As just like as robots who were actually had consciousness but hadn't found it yet, than these people who were like kind of angstily trying to embody their new consciousness, or in Bernard's case, trying to figure out just what he's doing there, or like what he's doing from scene to scene. And part of it's that, Man in Black is now allowed to be more than a one-dimensional character. So the humans actually have a lot of intrigue around them, and you have characters like Elsie and well, I guess Grace is what we were calling her, but Emily, who just sort of like pop off the screen.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Dolores and Teddy are like acting real
and
hard.
having the same conversation every week. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I wonder whether or not, in retrospect, because I think what Westworld had to do was show a lot, despite the fact that it obscures a lot of things, it had to show a lot of cards at first. You basically wanted to create this idea that William could be the villain of the show, but also the hero of the show at the same time. And obviously that duality is sort of commented on. But I wonder if they had known it was going to be a hit on this level, if they could have told it almost chronologically.
Yeah.
And it had been more of an arc of like happening upon this technology, building this thing, having these sort of really deep moral questions about whether or not death should be the end or not. And then you sort of slowly get into these outer reaches of this world, rather than the kind of half flashback, half time jump stuff that they're doing.
I think that's a good question, and I think that it's not even, I don't know if it's even a showrunner situation or what. I do think that there's, I count myself, among those who kind of figured out the Man in Black William thing very early on and watched the whole show. And when I mentioned it to people, I didn't feel guilty about it, because I was just like, I wonder if. But then halfway through the season, I was like, oh, there's no wondering anymore. And then I retroactively felt bad for waking up the host, as it were.
Right.
But it's easy to look back now and be like, it was a mistake to build the whole first season around a reveal that a lot of people figured out early.
Yeah.
But that drew a lot of people in.
Yeah.
Right. And I keep bringing this up with Dolores. Like, I think that, I would totally believe it if you told me we did market research for the show and 90% of the viewing audience still thinks Dolores is the hero, like as of episode 5.
Sure.
So there's. You just don't know how everyone in the world is watching the show. You see this with Game of Thrones all the time, where it's like the vast majority of people watching miss 50% of what happens.
Right. And you have probably people out there who have been dying for like 2 or 3 seasons to see Cersei get her head cut off.
Yeah.
Not that I know what's going to happen to Cersei or anything. And then you have some people who are like, they can't lose this person because she's the most exciting person on this show.
But I do think, to answer your question, I think there was probably a more linear way to tell it, but I think that but so far I think they've done a pretty good job. I think that this season has been, after episode 1, I thought we were going to get a totally linear show. There'd be flashbacks and everything else, but I really thought season 2 was going to be the mystery of what happened right before the beach.
Yes.
It's a 2-week window, and everything is within that, and they've gone in a million different directions.
And there are at least 3 time zones, I guess, and possibly more, depending on what you're thinking about Arnold. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
There's just so much going on, and it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to judge it. I've been enjoying it. It definitely feels like there's more of a steady hand than like Lost, which is what it keeps getting compared to by myself, and to this season. There's a lot of Lost in there, but like, you watch Lost thinking like, I wonder if they're going to be able to stick the landing, because they've just been making stuff up as they go along.
Also just like you just go back and realize like how nuts it is that Lost was 22 episodes a season, and you're just watching, you're just like, wow, there's really like 5 episodes, like 5 weeks of our life where you were just like
in an Iraq torture chamber.
Okay, cool. Yeah, right, exactly. All right, well, Westworld The Recappables goes up Sunday nights.
Yeah.
The theories and tinfoil hat stuff goes up on Tuesday.
Right.
And then Masked Man
every Wednesday afternoon,
and Press
Box is Tuesday mornings. I think
Tuesday mornings. Yeah. Okay, so you can hear Shoemaker all over the Ringer Podcast Network. Thank you so much for filling in today.
Thanks for having me, man. I was going to be bored today without something to do.
Talk to you later.